Hey there, Salt Strong family. This is Pat Ogletree, and in this video, I'm going to bring you this week's fishing report along with some tips to help you catch more juvenile tarpon. Now, on to the first part of this video, which is the fishing report from last week. I launched out of a little place called Scottsmore Landing, which is in Scottsmore, Florida. It's located in between Titusville and New Smyrna Beach on the west shore of the Indian River. Now, if you've never been to this ramp before, it's a nice little ramp, but it's really made for your smaller skiffs, like your technical pulling skiffs and canoes and kayaks and that kind of stuff. It is a concrete ramp, but because of how shallow the canal is to go out into the main part of the river, it's really too tight for, a bigger bay boat or something that you'd pull on a dual axle trailer. So I would definitely keep this down to smaller boats. But if you do have that type of craft and you can get out here, this is a great area and has access to really good fishing. Matter of fact, I kind of nicknamed this place Slamsmore because I catch a lot of slams here. And that was the intent of this trip, was I wanted to go catch a slam, hopefully mix in a juvenile tarpon in that slam. So when I launched at daybreak, I went out the canal and we headed south. As I was going south, I noticed that there was a lot of bait fish activity, and this has been normal for this time of year. I've noticed the past couple of months. The bait fish are packed tight together. There's a lot of activity, but it's farther off from the shore. What I've noticed the past couple of trips is I haven't seen a lot of predatory activity in the mix with this. It seems the predator fish have been either further out, which I haven't been fishing, or it's been closer into shore. And that was exactly what was happening this trip. Within the first 10-15 minutes, I got my trout on, caught it on a Slam Shady 2.0, and that was good, so I got that off the list. Now all I have to do is catch either that snook or that redfish or the tarpon, and the next one that I found was the redfish. Now, the redfish, I actually happened to find two schools, and they were grouped together by size. The first group was the smaller ones. They were barely slot, right around there. And then the second group was the upper slot fish. The issue that I was having a problem seeing them. What was happening is there was a nice wind coming out of the south-southeast, and there was a chop on the water, and that mixed in with that sunlight that was just low in the sky, had this big glare, and I was finding the fish, but it was too late. I was right on top of them. So I would spook the school off, and then I would have to let them settle down, go find them again, and of course by the time I'd find them again with all that glare and that chop, I wind up spooking them again. But I was able to get one of the redfish to bite. So now I got the redfish off the list, and what I really wanted to catch was a juvenile tarpon. Now my window today was going to get cut short because of the weather that was rolling in, so I had to leave those fish alone to go accomplish what I was trying to do, and that was to catch the slam. So I went into this little creek, and this creek has always held either juvenile snook or juvenile tarpon most of the time, and I figured I would have a good chance at completing that slam back there. So as I entered the mouth of this creek, it was really nasty smelling. It was a lot of stagnant water. It just had this putrid smell to it, but I was hoping at the back of the creek that maybe the water would clean up a little bit, and that's exactly what happened. So when I got to the back of the creek, the water was a little bit cleaner, but more importantly, there was tarpon rolling back there, and that's always a good sign. Now, just because you see tarpon rolling doesn't necessarily mean you can catch them, but I got some tips later on that I was able to hook up a couple of them. But as I was fishing back there and waiting for those tarpon to roll, I wound up catching 5 or 6 they're juvenile snook, but it completed the slam for the day. So now my intent was to catch those juvenile tarpon. So on one of my first casts, I wound up getting a bite from one. I went to set the hook and the line broke. I don't know what happened. I think it might have been a bad knot. So it happened to be the only lure of that particular type that I had. So I retied another type of lure that was close to it and waited again. And in the next, say, 30-40 minutes, I wound up jumping 4 tarpon. One of them was a really good size one. It was probably 36 to 40 inches. I had it on for a while, but my hook straightened out, and I didn't wind up with the Grand Slam. But I did have a lot of fun chasing after these little tarpon. And that leads to the next part of my video, and that was what I found that works for me when I'm going after these juvenile tarpon. So just to kind of give you an idea of this setup, it's a residential canal that is at the very back of it, it's stagnant water. And the type of residential canals I like to look for are ones that have mangrove lined shorelines, or at least parts of it's mangrove lined. And the reason for that is because these juvenile tarpon, whenever they're at that size, one of their main forage is what's called a mosquito fish. They're really small bait fish. They're only maybe 2 inches long at the most, but at this point they were maybe half an inch to an inch. And the tarpon love these things, and they'll stay in there until they reach a certain point, and then they move out into the open flats. But while they're in there, they're keyed in on these tiny little bait fish. What happens a lot of times is a lot of people will throw, like, say, a Slam Shady 2.0, and I find that lure works really good whenever you're out on more of the open flats area, because at that point they're cluing in on bigger fish. But when they're in the back of these canals, it seems like the smaller the lures, the better. Now the issue is when you get to these little small lures, like this is one of the ones I was throwing. This is called a spoiler shad. It's made by Storm. It's only 2 inches long and it weighs 1/8 of an ounce. The paddle tail seemed like it was scaring them off a little bit. So what I did was I switched over to a DOA Terrorize. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but this is a nice lure. It's a do-nothing lure. You basically cast it out there and you throw it in. Now, this is an empty body. They usually come rigged. They are 1/8 of an ounce, and these are just little replaceable bodies. So when they get tore up, you can take the body off, put it on a new hook, and they work really well. You just cast them out and you throw them in. You don't have to work them really hard to get any action out of them. And another thing that was working really well for me was after I lost my Terror, my one jig head that was designed for that, I couldn't use that anymore. I switched over to this. This is a mushroom jig head. It's made for Ned rigs. And what I did was I took a Slam Shady 2.0, I cut the tail of it off, and then I cut it real short. Now this thing is maybe only 2 inches long, but that's exactly what they were feeding on. You just throw it out there, reel it straight in, don't get any action on it, just a straight retrieve. And what they're looking for is they were just clued in on these little tiny fish. So anything, a 3-inch paddle tail, they would just ignore. They weren't doing anything with it. So you really need to downsize and get these smaller, just what I call do-nothing lures. You just throw them out there and you wind them in. Now with this, you can't go out there with medium heavy tackle or even a medium action rod, because what's happening is these weights are only 1/16 of an ounce, maybe even smaller than that. And it's different when you're talking about a 16-ounce owner twist lock on a jerk shad, because that jerk shad actually weighs a lot. Well, these little plastic baits, they hardly weigh anything. So the outfit that I'm using to catch these juvenile tarpon are the same thing that I'm using to throw a Ned rig in the wintertime. It's my light action. I have a Star VPR. It's a 7-foot, and it's rated for 1/8 to a 5/8 ounce weight. I have a Procyon LT 2000 series reel spooled with 8-pound braid, and I'm throwing it with 12 to 15-pound leader. I start out with 12-pound leader, and if I'm getting breakoffs, I'll move up to 15-pound. Now, the reason why I use such a light leader is because these baits are so light. When you try to go up to, say, a 20-pound leader and you're reeling it in, that leader material causes so much drag in the water, it'll actually cause the bait, instead of it running straight, it'll twist, and it just doesn't look natural. So the lighter leader is a necessity to get these lures to act right the way that they want. And again, if you're getting broke off on the 12, you can go up to 15. And for these fish, because they're not really known to have really sharp teeth, it works pretty good. I don't get broken off that often, but it does allow you to get more bites, and that's what's important. Another thing about these smaller lures is because of those little thin wire hooks, you will actually get more hookups because of that. It penetrates the jaw. The jaw of a juvenile tarpon, or the jaw of any tarpon, I should say, is very hard. It's very bony, and it's hard to get a hook into them. So with these light wire hooks, they penetrate well, and you do get more hookups. But the disadvantage of that, and there's always a give and take with anything, is because it's a thin wire hook, you can't apply a lot of pressure. I did wind up, like I said earlier in the video, I did wind up losing the bigger tarpon because I put too much heat on it. And like Luke says, soft hands when you're dealing with something like this. So light drag, light pressure, and just work the fish in, and then you can get them to the boat. So one advantage, more hookups. Disadvantage, you can't horse them in. But I'd rather, one of the beauties about juvenile tarpon is the fight. It's the jump, it's the aerials that you get on it. It is nice to get them in the boat so you can get that nice picture with them, but I think most people fish for tarpon and try to catch tarpon because of that fight, because of the show that they put on. So the best way to actually get these tarpon to hit is when you're approaching these backs of these residential canals, you have to approach them very, very cautiously, very, very stealth. As soon as the tarpon know that you're there, they're going to shut down. Now, because they're air breathers at this stage and this water's really stagnant, you'll still see them rolling, but as far as the bite, they're really sensitive to any kind of movement or any type of pressure. So approach the area with caution, be really, really slow. And what I like to do is I like to sit and observe. And what you'll notice by observing for a little while is they'll roll in specific areas, maybe by this branch or over there by this point or over by this dock. And what you can do is just time it out. The idea is to wait for the tarpon to roll and then place a cast exactly where it was rolling. And that's the best way to get a hookup with these things. When you're reeling it in, you want to do a straight retrieve. No jerks, no pauses, no twitches, no anything. The variable is the speed in which you retrieve it and where in the water column that you want that lure to ride. Sometimes they want it right on the bottom, sometimes they want it in the middle, and sometimes they want it on the top. It just depends on the mood that day. But you can figure that out as you go. So after you manage to get a hookup, and you fight the fish, you land it, you get your picture, you put it back in the water, the best thing to do is just sit still for 5 or 10 minutes. Let the whole area settle back down. Once they get comfortable and start rolling again, that's the best time to start casting and making your presentations. Before that, with the fish fighting, it could spook the whole area out, but just sit motionless and don't move at all for about 5 or 10 minutes and let them come back up. So, I hope you learned something from this video, and if you have a different way that you like to fish for these juvenile tarpon, I would love to hear about it. Just leave a comment below and tell me your favorite way or your most productive way of fishing for these, and I'd like to hear it. You know, that's what we're all here for, is learning. As always, thanks for watching, and while you're out there, please pick up after yourself, and if you have to, please pick up after others. We need to take care of the natural resources that we have, and until next time, thanks and bye.